before starting my own business, I was working as a research and development engineer for Goodyear. Funnily enough, at the time, I was already playing with neural networks. So the building blocks of today's artificial intelligence, right? And my job was to create more than 1,000 simulations of possible combinations of material, shape, and stuff like that. I realized that I hated the job. I was becoming the IT guy, and gone was my freedom, like completely gone. And I realized I really love teaching. I'm really good at teaching. What I'm trying to do now is actually replace myself. So I have created a co-CEO, I have a co-CFO and a co-CMO. It's not Easy Tech that will pay for my shoes. It's going to be Macpreneur who will pay for my shoes. At the moment, for me, really, the freedom that I gained was the reward.
All right. The Macpreneur here, Damien. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Joshua.
I don't have a Mac. Are Macs supposed to be easier than PCs? Like, how did you stumble across this so you could leave we were just chatting, leaving the cubicle farm or leaving the ball and chain of working at a big faceless organization?
Yeah, so I don't know if it's easier to use than a PC. I guess when you are used to Windows, it can be a shock to start using a Mac. The analogy that I use is, so I'm Belgian, and so we drive on the right side of the road, but my wife is British, and so sometimes we go to the UK and then I have to drive on the other side of the road. And to me, going from a PC or Windows to a Mac, it's roughly the same kind of experience. You have to adjust your habits. You have to learn new things. Mostly keyboard shortcuts will change a little bit because the keys are not exactly the same. So there is no Windows key anymore. There is a command key. And so on the PC side, when you are used to do Control C, Control V, now you do Command C, Command V. So you have to change a little bit the habits. The way you handle the windows, same thing, the buttons, instead of being in the top right corner on Windows, they are in the top left corner on the Mac. So there are a few things like that. What I really enjoy about the Mac and the Mac operating system is, first of all, a lot of built-in applications are coming from Apple that usually on the PC side you have to either find a free application or you have to pay for an application of the same caliber. And also the Mac platform is, I would say, more automation friendly. Mm-hmm. I don't say that you can't automate on Windows. You can, right? If you are super geek, if you really want to, you can learn how to do automation on Windows. But the way the Mac has been structured and the operating system is structured, it actually makes it super easy to automate.
Yeah, I've found that Windows or PC is more customizable and Apple is more just like, this is how it works on Apple. Use it this way or don't use it at all.
Yeah, that's I would say 99% true on the iPhone and the iPad, for sure. Yeah, I fully agree with you. On the Mac, it's still a platform that Apple allows their user to customize much more. So we still have the ability to install third-party apps coming from anywhere downloading from a website and so on. And there are things that we can do on the Mac that it's impossible to do on the iPhone and the iPad because it's so closed as a platform. The Mac, what few people know is that the underlying operating system of the Mac is a cousin of Linux. And so it's also very good for developers. And for a very long time, that was a strong point of the Mac platform. But now, obviously, Microsoft has what is called a Windows subsystem for Linux. So now Linux is embedded also inside Windows. So basically, they have bridged the gap that there was between the Mac and Windows. And the reason why I actually started using Macs and buying Macs was at the time, the processor was an Intel processor, and that meant that I could actually dual boot macOS and Windows. So how did I transition from a full-time job where I was Windows only and at home where I was Mac? Well, when I needed to do things on certain applications that didn't exist on the Mac at the time, I simply restarted the computer and booted on the Windows partition. And then I was, at the time, I think I was Windows 7. Yeah, I think it was Windows 7 at the time.
Nice. And what were you doing before you left to do this full time? Because it seems like you worked on this for a few years before leaving corporate America. What were you doing before this? I didn't see it here written down.
Yeah, so before starting my own business, I was working as a research and development engineer for Goodyear, right? The tire manufacturer, headquartered in Akron, Ohio, and they have their second biggest development center, R&D center, here in Luxembourg, where I live. Like we were roughly 1,000 engineers, scientists, technicians, PhDs working on research and development for developing new tires. Yeah, that was my job. My job was, I was actually a simulation engineer. So I was on the computer simulating how the tire would behave. And I was predicting how the tire would be better if we changed shapes, materials inside, and stuff like that. And then I transitioned from being the person who ran the software to the person who developed the software and taught people on how to use the software. And the last 5 years of my career there, I actually pivoted internally towards lean product development. So it was process improvement kind of activities. And there I was really fortunate because I was able to facilitate workshops and organize training sessions. I was facilitating training sessions and coaching from the shop floor for people building tires in the plant to the top management of the research and development center. So every Thursday I was with a few colleagues, we were facilitating a luncheon with the director and their direct reports and following up on the continuous improvement, process improvement initiatives that was going on at the time.
That's interesting. How often are tires changing? Are they always like making new ones and adapting? Like how much innovation can you do with rubber?
Now that I think about it, that you asked the question, it's the same cycle as our smartphones. Every year there is a new model, there is a new winter tire, there is a new summer tire. So every year there is an improved version of the different tire types. Yeah, a little bit like in the smartphone arena, there are reviews and they compare, which one breaks shortest and which one is better in the snow and on wet conditions and so on. And it's a yearly cycle.
And that job sounds boring. Unless you're like really into that sort of thing, but it sounds pretty boring. Just looking at tires and like, if I change this, what happens? If I change that, what happens?
Funnily enough, at the time, I was already playing with neural networks. So the building blocks of today's artificial intelligence, right? I was already working with that because, so at the time, I was part of a team that was trying to develop a tire for one of the big car manufacturers. And that car manufacturer wanted what we call a run flat tire. It's a tire that is able to run even when punctured, right? And the goal was to be able to drive at least for 50 miles at 50 miles an hour, completely flat. And they didn't want to change the suspension. So for a run flat tire to work without air inside, you need very thick sidewalls, a lot of rubber to sustain the load, right? But the thicker the tire, the more forces it exerts on the suspension. And so, but they said, we don't want to change the suspension. So I was part of a team and my job was to create more than 1,000 simulations of possible combinations of material, shape, and stuff like that. And I was creating virtually tires that could never been produced, right? It could never have been built, never ever. But the idea was it was thousands of tires because there were so many parameters that I needed to have all the possible combinations of all those parameters. And then I ran a neural network program that looked at those 1,000 times all the indicators that I was predicting, right? To create actually a predictive model, a neural network model based on that. And based on that model, I was able to tell the engineers and the material development people, look, these are 3 candidates that would give us tires with the right properties. The car manufacturer wouldn't need to change the suspension. They built the 3 prototypes, and out of the 3 prototypes, 1 was accepted by the car manufacturer. It was not generative artificial intelligence, it was basic predictive artificial intelligence. But the model, the neural network model, had actually discovered relationships between all the parameters and the predictive output that we wanted.
So with that job, I mean, how are you running these simulations? Is it just one by one?
No, so we had massive supercalculators, and I would launch those jobs in batch, and then I would monitor them. It would run, I don't know how many, 10, 20 candidates at a time, but we had hundreds of servers. Also, we had server farms where we would launch those simulations. And those server farms were shared by all the simulation engineers in the same building. So we were actually competing for the resources. But yeah, there was software that was like checking, is there a free CPU or is there a free machine to start a simulation? And at the time, I also had automated most of the things. So I was basically monitoring if a simulation would fail, because that can happen. Sometimes it's not that easy actually to simulate the way tires behave. But I was just monitoring that and then relaunching manually if I needed to and stuff like that.
And that was like 10 years ago that you decided to leave that and do what you're doing now, almost 10 years?
It would have been 15 years ago because, I had this transition internally. So I think it was 2010 or 2011 when I switched I changed to the department in charge of process improvement and lean product development. And so for the next 5 years, so until 2016, that's when I was doing mostly training and facilitating workshops on process improvements. 2013 was when I started my company, EasyTech, part-time. And so I was working 3 days and a half for my employer. And then I had Thursday afternoon and Friday all day to work on the development of my own business. And I did that for 2 years and a half. Yeah.
And what was that like starting out? Because 10 years ago, social media was around, but it isn't like it is now. So I could see how showing folks how to use their Apple products more efficiently could be super beneficial. To now, it's kind of like, you need an answer to a question. There's just so many language models out there. I want to hear about like the story from where you started to like what you're doing now with all the different tools that people have access to in order to ensure you don't have to ever go back to modeling tires again.
I taught some evening classes for adults. So I organized an iPhone class, a MacBook class, and a class on how to manage pictures. So we take pictures on the iPhone and then we get them somehow on the Mac and we organize them on the Mac. And it was, each time it was like a 7 or 8 weeks program. So an hour and a half per week for 7 or 8 weeks. So that's how I started. Not very lucrative, but the people that I had in those training classes, those people became my first consulting clients, right? Because I was teaching them, I was showing my authority, my skills, and they would inevitably ask, Damien, do you know anyone who could come at my house to help me set up my new iPad or set up my new Mac? Or I'm not sure if my Mac is properly backed up. Can you come up? Do you know someone who can come up at my house to do that? And I was like, yes, I can do that for you. And so that was my first lead generation. So lead gen was the in-person webinars that we do. So we talk about webinars a lot, right? A few years ago, it was the in-person webinars that gave me my first clients. And when I left my corporate job, then I joined BNI, Business Network International. It's a networking organization, and there was only one chapter in Luxembourg at the time. But I joined them because, again, I wanted to pivot or to switch my client base. Instead of having B2B, mostly B2B, I wanted more a B2C kind of clients. And I figured that by joining a business networking group, I would be exposed and I would be with other entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and they would be able to refer me to other business people. And it paid out. In 18 months, I was able to go from 80% B2C to 80% of my clients being B2B and increasing the revenue as well at the same time.
I guess BNI can work for some folks. I've been in like 2 or 3 groups and it was just kind of like, for myself, it didn't work. But when you have like I feel like when you have like a service that people are like, oh, like I actually do need help with that. It's like such an easy transition versus depending on your business, sometimes you can't make a living fully on referrals. You have to figure out how to market and get people to find you so you don't remain a secret. And it sounds like BNI was a good way for you to start meeting people and get out of corporate America to get some introductions while you're building this up.
Yeah, exactly. BNI, so for people who don't know, BNI, it's a 41-year-old organization that started in the US, initially on the West Coast. It's a well-oiled machine. It's a well-proven framework. But as you said, with some type of work or some types of businesses, it takes a little bit more time to start getting referrals versus others. I remember it's a company they are selling fruit baskets. And obviously, yeah, they started to get the new customers very quickly, right? It was,
oh yeah,
I'll send this to someone. Super easy to refer, and it's very tangible kind of product. So it's very easy to recommend and to refer. On my side, doing consulting, that was not easy. That's why I say it took me 18 months to start getting really a good return on investment. And I think the mistake that I made at the time was actually to rely too heavily on BNI. I was expecting that it would do most of my marketing. And I realized BNI is great as long as you still need to do typical prospecting and other networking events, and relying 100% on BNI was not a good strategy.
Yeah. Did you find the referring and all the homework you have to do for BNI overwhelming? For me, I was like, man, this is a lot of work and nothing's coming back. Felt like a 5th job.
No, for me, it was my prospecting school. Actually, BNI taught me how to present myself, how to be concise in presenting my offer or presenting what I do as services, and also better communicate. And also what I realized with BNI was that I had a small group of entrepreneurs with whom I could test ideas. I could test product ideas. So whenever I had an idea for a new workshop or the iPhone security training that I'm teaching today, it was born thanks to BNI, because I had the idea, I tested it with my BNI chapter. I had a few people sign up for the course, so it was very cheap for them because I said, look, I'm doing it. This is the first time. I'm testing a new concept for a course, an iPhone security course, and I got great feedback to improve for the next time. Yeah, it's not only getting referrals and generating revenue, but it can help you also for business development, actually.
Yeah, it's probably better for business development because you can get 5, 6 opinions one morning rather than learning on the fly. And then referrals could be an added bonus. Fast forward to now. So you join BNI, you start getting into B2C. Can you tell us who your first big break was? Like you got a big client or something, you're like, okay, I'm on to something now, versus having the thoughts of oh man, maybe I should go back to designing tires. I'm not sure if this is going to work. I think everyone has that thought.
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, there was a time when I would have been ready to knock back at the door of my past employer. And the reasons were that even though I managed to go from B2C to B2B in Apple Consulting and starting to earn good money, I realized that I hated the job. I was becoming the IT guy. Damien it's my IT guy, or it's our IT guy. I became that person, and the freedom that I had gained by leaving corporate America, I suddenly lost it again, because at any point in time, they could call me and say, Damien, our printer doesn't work anymore. We can't fax anymore. And gone was my freedom. Completely gone, and I hated to be this kind of firefighting mode. And so I had clients, but because I was not really happy, and I was not trying to find new clients, right? Because since I hated the thing, I was really reluctant to get new clients. And again, thanks to BNI, one of my BNI chapter member was a business coach And she was organizing with the Chamber of Commerce a series of workshops for businesses who were struggling or wanted to pivot. And so I managed to sneak into that for free. So I had myself these courses, then I was mentored by an experienced business professional, entrepreneur, and that was actually the pivot I needed. And I realized I really love teaching. I'm really good at teaching. Is that, okay, I need to now switch from B2B consulting to B2B training. With the help of my mentor, and I started to contact a few training institutes here in Luxembourg, telling them, look, I'm Damien, I can do this and this. My specialty is I can teach in English, and I know the English version of Word, Excel, and PowerPoint better than the French one. And because I worked for an American company for 18 years, right, I was obliged to do all my presentation in English. All the emails that I was writing were in English. When I started working for them, it took, I don't know how many months, a few months, and I started dreaming in English. And now I think in English, even though I'm French speaker since I was born, I'm now thinking in English. And I watch British TV or American TV. I don't need the subtitles, and I don't need to translate anything in my head. It's like I understand, right? Again, thanks to BNI, we organized a networking event open for many visitors, and I invited one of my prospects. She was the sales rep for a big training institute here in Luxembourg, and I invited her to the BNI event. And thanks to that, she started giving me work as a subcontractor. So it was a very large training institute. They had very big clients like big banks and stuff like that. But most of the training were in French. But from time to time, they needed to give the training in English. Their trainers, even though they knew a little bit of English, they were not comfortable teaching in English or teaching on the English version of the interface. And then I started to get more and more gigs. And from that one client, I started then to head another training institute, and then I started teaching for the university, again as a subcontractor for another training institute. And one of my colleagues there referred me to the institute in charge of training all the public servants here in Luxembourg. So everybody's who is working for the government, for the police, for the army, whatever governmental entities, they have a central place where they can then request training and do trainings. And one of the sections is, and I got referred to that, and now that is my biggest client, where I teach roughly 400 people that I teach every year just through that one client.
What is like the biggest difference in language? Because certain languages have different like dialects and things like that. So like transitioning over to English and being able to speak in English, did you ever have like a moment where you said something and it wasn't received in the right way that you could share?
Two things, right? It's pronunciation and grammar and knowing, okay, which word to use in which context. But then there's the cultural aspect of speaking another language. When I was working for that, it was an American company. It was an American multinational company. But in Luxembourg, in our research and development center, we had more than 15 nationalities. So, and at one point I was sitting in front of a Japanese person, and so I started learning a few Japanese words as well. When I look back at it, what I learned was not American English. I learned European English.
UK English.
And it's not even UK English. It's European English. It's English spoken by French, German, Dutch, yes, UK people, but we don't necessarily use the same words and the same expressions as people who are really living in Britain or living in the US. We have our own kind of expressions. And what I know about American English, it's just through TV shows and movies and now podcasts, right? I listen to a bunch of American podcasts because still it's the main country where there are podcasters. And so I pick up stuff from American English from those podcasts now.
Gotcha. Do you have any examples? I want to hear from your perspective.
So, for instance, I listen to Mac Power Users, and David Sparks, the host, is always saying "paying for my shoes." So whenever he's doing like earning money, it's like I'm paying for my shoes. That's his expression. Yeah, security now. Steve Gibson, he has also a few expressions that now don't come directly, but yeah, there are a bunch of things like that I start to pick up. That usually American ways of saying things. Yeah.
What's like the biggest difference between how native English speakers say things versus European English speakers say things that you've noticed?
So I think we tend to use simpler words, right? We don't use very complicated words when we speak. So we don't really have like raining cats and dogs, these kind of things, right?
those sayings that everyone thinks they know what it means.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, also what I learned when I was working there in that multicultural environment was the way different nationalities speak up or don't speak up, right? So Dutch people are really, really super honest, and they will tell you straight in your face what they think about anything. They are not shy, and which is not the same with the French, which is not the same with the Germans. Yeah, it's really funny to see. So I'm kind of generalizing, but there are some tendencies that I realized with certain nationalities versus others. But what is nice as well is that I had also American colleagues, obviously, because they were the company being from America. I had at one point one of my managers was a US person that stayed for a few years in Luxembourg towards a promotion. And actually, that was one of my best managers that I had. He was really pushing me, but he was also, I think he had the right psychology with me. He knew exactly how to get the best out of me. And so I learned a lot about leadership and management from that person as well.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to learn on the fly. It sounds like you're almost talking about like, people in the like North America, like the Northeast are more like direct versus if you go to like a southern state, people are a little more gentle with their words. So, I mean, you've been doing this for a while now and you left designing tires. How has your world changed now? Language learning models are just getting better every day. Because I mean, for you it's probably exciting. And for a lot of people are like, oh no, this is going to take away my job. Some people are like, oh no, this is going to take away my job. Versus I have a feeling you looked at it as like, wow, this is going to enhance what I can offer.
Yeah, so funnily enough, I found back my first conversation with ChatGPT. It was early December 2022, and I asked it a technical question. So I wanted to see, can it replace me as a job, my job, right? I asked it a technical question about macOS, and I remember the answer was, I'm sorry, I cannot consult the internet to answer the question. And so I was like, whew, okay, so I still have a few years in front of me. But afterwards, I realized that it's a futile attempt at trying to say, no, it's not going to replace what I will be able to do. The question is, okay, there are things that we human are better suited to do, and then things that these large language models are very, very good at. Nowadays, if I would ask the same question today, I would get a very, very good answer. And basically, what I'm trying to do now is actually replace myself. So I still have a few Apple consulting client. One of them, maybe once every 2 months or every 3 months, she asked me a question because there was an issue on a Mac or something like that. And inevitably now, I take the screenshot, I remove the PII, take the screenshot, give it to ChatGPT, give it to Gemini, look at the answers, and yeah, they're good. So now I'm building a GPT for that client so that I will say, look, if you have a question about your Mac, open ChatGPT, ask the question to that Damien's assistant. If it's not okay, if you still have questions after that, if you need help implementing things, then you can come to me, right? The other place where I'm starting to rely more heavily on artificial intelligence is for the strategic stuff. So I have created a co-CEO, I have a co-CFO and a co-CMO. And so there are assistants that I've built that have been fed my goals, my short-term and long-term goals, my vision of life, what EasyTech does. So all the panels, all the products and services that I offer at the moment, what I do with the podcast, where I want the podcast to grow, how I imagine, again, my next pivot will be that it's not EasyTech that will pay for my shoes. It's going to be Macpreneur who will pay for my shoes. At the moment, I earn a little bit of affiliate revenue. It just pays back the podcast host, the hosting platform and the website. So it's paying for the basic expenses that I have now for the podcast, but it doesn't pay me. And they know that, they know everything, and I have ideas, and then I ask them, okay, what do you think about that idea? What am I not thinking about? Especially the marketing officer. So I'm an engineer. I'm not very good at marketing. I'm pretty good at sales. So when I have a sales meeting, my conversion rate is between 90 and 95%. So if I can get in front of a potential customer, I know how to speak and what to say and the questions to ask, right? So for the sales process, in-person sales process, I'm pretty good. But for the marketing stuff, I'm really bad. It's funny because sometimes I never ask the AI to spit out a draft. I always give it a first draft. And then I ask, okay, what do you think about that draft? And inevitably, my chief marketing officer says, no, that's boring. And then helps me rewrite the email, the newsletter, or the sales page, or the sales copy to make it actually more attractive. And I would say that I'm still 80% in the assistant phase. So the AI assistant phase is I have built specialized assistant, but I still need to open a browser or open an application and interact, discuss with that assistant. There is no real automation, but I'm working now 20% working on building actually agents, so autonomous workflows using artificial intelligence. But I'm still relying heavily on these assistants. And for instance, whenever I do something of value, now I have an assistant. So I have created, so the last pivot I did was to do B2B training. So I'm actually now a Microsoft trainer. I teach professionals how to use Excel, Word, PowerPoint, Outlook on their Windows PC, right? That's mostly what I do. And for one of my clients, I was only doing, I'm also doing cybersecurity and smartphone security. So one of my clients, I was only doing smartphone security. And then I pitched them some Google Workspace training because I'm also in that ecosystem. And I have a curriculum developer. So that's an assistant that I built. I gave it a few of my trainings and everything, right? The slide deck, the presenter notes, the exercise files. So it knows how I teach, my way of teaching and my way of presenting information and also doing exercises. And now I can go to that assistant. I can tell it, look, I have an idea for a new topic, for a new course. Can you help me first draft the training plan and then a summary sheet that I can give to a prospect? When the prospect says, okay, that looks good. Now I have an assistant that helped me build the entire training program, the slides, the exercise files, and I can go. So it's really so much faster now to create a new offering for my business.
Yeah, there's really no excuse anymore. Something that you'd have to hire someone to do for you if you're not good at it. Language learning models can do probably 90% of it for you. And then you can either figure out how to do the other 10%, or it's a lot more affordable to hire someone to do 10% of the work rather than 100% of the work from scratch.
Yeah. And so how do you use artificial intelligence yourself?
For myself, oh man, pretty much with everything. If I need to think something through, brainstorming. I mean, I don't know if anyone, I'm sure other people do this, but I use it to think through problems a lot. Mm-hmm. So I don't ask it for answers. I ask it to think through something. So I'll say, hey, I'm considering, XYZ. What if this happens? And then what if that happens? Well, what if I look at it from this lens? What if I look at it from that lens? And then once I run out of questions, I say, all right, let's summarize everything and put it together to come to some sort of end conclusion. I feel like that's what it's most helpful with, rather than when you started out, you were going to BNI and you're like, hey, what do you think of this idea? What do you think of that idea? Now you don't really have to do that. And you can do it a lot faster and probably get better insights and more details because it scours the entire digital world.
Yeah, something that I did recently. So I did a deep research on my ICP, or it's more the ideal listener for the podcast. It took the AI, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes, go on Reddit, go on various places to try to understand the language of the potential listener, so the Mac-loving solopreneur, and prepare a very detailed report. Now, that report is the source, is the knowledge base, right, for an assistant to help me come up with ideas for the podcast, test out, as you said, new ideas, right? So if I give this kind of new product, new service to that ICP, how would that person react? What would they say? What would they ask? What would be clear? What would not be clear, and stuff like that? Yeah.
Sounds like you left a job and created a whole new world for yourself. Found a lot of happiness along the way. So that's what's most important.
Yeah, so for me, really, the freedom that I gained was the reward. Even though I have not yet reached the top, the salary, so I cannot yet pay myself the same amount of salary that I had at my peak after like 15 or 18 years of career, right? Because let's face it, I'm really 10 years. So I'm technically 13 years in, but really 10 years full-time as an entrepreneur. Yeah, it took quite some time, but I'm also very happy with the time I was able to spend with my daughters. Now the eldest one is 18, the youngest is 16, but I was able to go to all the school events, school parties. I was even able to take one full week to go to Germany with the class of my daughter. And yeah, those are the things that you can't really put a price on that.
Yeah, well, there's some things money can't buy. Well, great. It sounds like getting those experiences with your family was the biggest return on investment you could have got by taking a leap of faith.
Yeah, exactly.
So happy to have you on. I love the conversation. We'll see everyone next time. Bye.